It is the penultimate day here on RPG A Day at the Miskatonic Playhouse today. Let's call it up on screen. The obscure RPG you've played. Newman, who's going to take this one for us?
This is going to be Lydia.
Lydia, let's pop you into the solo spot. Over to you.
So my favorite obscure RPG is called Heaven in the Dust, and it's inspired by the musical Hadestown, which is itself inspired by the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice and the whole journey into the underworld to bring back a loved one. Although this game doesn't actually go down the plot of the musical, it's more the setting, which is the Greek gods in the Dust Bowl. So it's a 1930s setting, a very bleak setting, a setting that's full of kind of poverty and desperation and tragedy as well. You are essentially creating your own Greek tragedy. It falls under the umbrella of games called Belonging Outside Belonging, which is where it's a kind of a sub-series of games about people outside of the mainstream society building their own little community and building their own links and creating a very vulnerable but very emotionally affecting world to play in. You don't need to know the musical to play it. You don't need to know the myths to play it either, because you have a playbook, which again goes back to sort of archetypes, really, and it gives you ideas on how to play your character. But it tells you steer the narrative towards tragedy. Essentially, it's a successful game if everybody is miserable forever, which is very sad. But that's what Greek tragedy is all about, really. There's no dice, there's no GM. It's a very, very collaborative system, and you earn the right to do something powerful with your character by first doing something which leaves your character vulnerable or shows them in a bad light. So it's really good to stop power gaming, because I mean, if you're playing a god, then there's always the temptation to throw a thunderbolt, I suppose, but you can't really do that. Well, you could, but you'd have to do something which really makes your character fall down a bit first.
Can I ask a mainstream question off that?
Absolutely.
So obviously, like so many people, I'm going to be a fan of the novel before I think the Amazon TV series. Is it like, just putting it in the context of someone who doesn't know this game, is it a bit American Gods in terms of you can create a godlike character and bring them into the modern world?
Well, I'd say it does take something from American Gods in terms of that whole idea of these gods are not the center of the world anymore, and they're kind of, this is where the belonging outside belonging comes in. I mean, it depends. You can really create your own little setting. In the game that I played, it was a very isolated little town, and it was one of these towns where there's one business which rules everything, and the whole town basically exists for this business. So it was a very kind of closed off world. It was the only place in the Depression where you could really go and be guaranteed of a job. That's the setting that we created. So you can make it directly 1930s if you want. You can have it just slightly with the vibe of that era. It's really up to the group as to the world that they play in, because that's part of the actual game session, is to decide, well, what is this world that we're creating? And you decide together, is it a city? Is it an outpost somewhere in the middle of nowhere? Where are we playing? What does the world look like? So this is where the very collaborative, no dice, no masters comes in. I really recommend giving it a go.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have an obscure role-playing game they have played?
I think the problem with is the definition obscure. In that I've got one that I could mention that none of you may ever have heard of, but actually I'm in a fairly thriving Discord community by the creators of it. And that's Good Society, which is my green screen's playing up.
Yeah.
There we go.
Which is
his book is green.
We met them at the UK Games Expo.
No, you didn't. So this is Storybrews. What you met was Poppycock, which was a card game.
Thank you.
But very similar artwork. But this is it's a collaborative role-playing game where you are your Regency people, you have two characters. You have your own character, and you have what your key connection is,
Mhm.
and you have different phases, and it works quite nicely there. But yeah,
See, for me, obscure is very few people have heard of it. So I was at the UK Expo talking to. I have no idea what a grognard is. What defines
Grognard,
a
it's like an old
grognard?
wargaming
Is it? It's a
player.
sort of because
I think it's
I'm
more
s-
of a term rather than an actual definition. It's more of like a
Okay.
generalized term for an old
So it's kind of like,
school
do you have to be up
wargaming
north? Do you have
so-and-so.
to be? I don't know. But yeah, I was talking to those folks, and I mentioned the game Laserburn, which was a tiny little book with literally a folded cardboard cover, photocopied and sold in stores for like £1.75. And it was a great game. We used to play it a lot at school. And it was about people with armor and guns and everything like that. The chap who wrote it developed it further, and it became Warhammer 40,000.
Wow.
And it was just like,
Was that
oh,
popular?
wow. Apparently so, yeah. It all started from a little game called Laserburn, because they did little
Wow.
15mm miniatures as well. It's
Yeah.
crazy, but very few people had heard of it unless you were in the sort of like role-playing stuff. But
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of obscure for me. Newman,
That's obscure. We'll give you that.
what's obscure for you?
Do you know, I don't have anything that matches that story. That I mean,
Mr.
that's quite a wonderful
Mainstream.
story. Well, no, I mean, there's one or two things. There's one I have to say I'm guilty of not playing it, so I'm not sure it answers the question. This is obscure RPG that you've played. Something that I'd love to play is called I think it's called Mummy Resurrection, or Mummy the Resurrection. And I think the idea, and I think it was Lydia talking about her game, that it reminded me of this thing that I wanted to play. It's the idea that in today's contemporary world, you wake up and you are a mummy. You're essentially this pharaoh, this godlike character, but essentially you don't have godlike powers, but you develop them as you go through the game, almost because you have to play the memory of your character. So you're very much playing a two-age dynamic story, which really appeals to me, because I really do love that idea of you're playing the now, but you're also playing this version of your character from way back when, because I just think there's such a skill in that as a player and as a keeper or storyteller or GM. So I don't think it's that common. I think it's like, if you think World of Darkness kind of games, vampire, werewolf, hunter, I think it's one of the lesser known kind of cousins, Wraith, kind of down that line, that doesn't get as much love. So I think that would be my bag, but someone's probably going to comment in here and go, it's not World of Darkness. I think you'll find it's this. And I'll go, yeah, sorry, you're right, because you know it better than I do. So thank you for commenting and telling me I'm wrong.
No. This is the thing about the RPG world. It's okay to be different. Yeah. It's okay not to like something. It's okay to like something. It's okay to get a detail wrong, because we're all human. We can't remember it. It's about collaborative. And, when you have these obscure games, it doesn't mean you're better than anyone else or what have you. It just means you've got a nice story to tell somebody that you can share. And I think our role playing is all about sharing the obscure with your friends. But there we go. That is day 30, the penultimate day of RPG Day. Tomorrow is the final day. What will the final question be? Let's find out.